I call those "that wasn't supposed to happen" moments. It really creates a big reaction in a child's life, and they assume that life is always going to be this way. They think in terms of, I wonder if my parents are ever going to get back together. I wonder if my dad still loves me because he's gone, or I wonder if my mom still loves me. And so they're wondering these things behind the scenes and interpreting life from those questions.
From the FamilyLife Podcast Network, this is FamilyLife Blended. I'm Ron Deal. This donor-supported podcast brings timeless wisdom and practical help and hope to blended families and those who love them. I am so glad that you've joined us in this journey. Welcome to episode number 50, Parenting Troubled Children in Stepfamilies. Hey, if you don't know, each spring, FamilyLife Blended puts on a worldwide live stream event called Blended and Blessed. It's a day of enrichment for blended family couples, and it's new every year. It's perfect for couples who just want to sit at home and soak in some good information and be encouraged, but it's also good for those who want to impact lots of other couples by hosting it in their home or their church. The next live stream is Saturday, April 24th, 2021, just around the corner. So now is the time to go to blendedandblessed.com to learn about the event. See how you can host it, see how you can get signed up. It's going to be a great event. You don't want to miss it. Join me at blendedandblessed.com. You know, one of the things I've noticed in my clinical work with blended families is that not all children struggle with the new family or have any significant individual emotional problems. Not even close to all children do. But occasionally, there is at least one child in a family who does. And sometimes that child has some pretty significant struggles. What is a parent and step-parent to do? How do you help a child who feels lost or angry or is self-destructive or who fights against the family coming together? And what if their anger or hurt is justified and you deserve it, but everyone else doesn't? Well, those are the topics we're going to be addressing in this episode of FamilyLife Blended. Danny Huerta is Vice President of Parenting and Youth at Focus on the Family. Danny oversees their initiatives to equip moms and dads with biblical principles and counsel for raising healthy, resilient children. Danny is a bilingual, licensed clinical social worker. He's been interviewed by various media outlets like Fox News, Fatherly, Christianity Today, and World Magazine. He's got a master's degree in social work, and he's finishing his doctorate in clinical psychology at California Southern University. He's got a new book out. We're going to talk a little bit about it. It's called 7 Traits of Effective Parenting. He and his wife, Heather, have been married since 1997, and they love being parents to their 2 teen kids, Alex and Lexi. Here's my conversation with Danny Huerta. So, Danny, you just told me your last name, Huerta. Did I say it right? Yeah. Give it to me.
Huerta. Yes, Huerta from Mexico. Yeah. There you go, Ron.
And it means orchard. And it occurs to me, you know, you run the parenting department at Focus on the Family. You're planting seeds in families. You got orchards all over the world because of the work that you do. That's pretty cool, man.
Wow, that's big stuff right there, Ron. I do love planting trees, and yeah, you're right. Planting God's love in people's families, wherever there's brokenness, there's desert growing in a place, and being able to bring God's love into that. You're right. Never thought of it that way. The orchard, as far as my love of gardening and my kids and I doing that, is definitely has resonated with that name. But yeah, thanks for bringing that. That's powerful for me today.
That free gift is compliments of Ron Deal. You're welcome.
What a deal. What a deal. That's great.
Man, I'm so glad that you're on the podcast with me today. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Ron. I always appreciate talking with you.
Yeah. For people who aren't aware of what the parenting department at Focus on the Family does, tell them what you guys offer. It's a lot.
It's a lot. I get to share this over and over again with people, and we have a large number of resources that are age and stage, a type of resources for parents, practical tools, and then we have plugged in resource for parents around technology and entertainment, and then Clubhouse, Club Junior, and Brio, magazines for spiritual growth in the home. And then beyond that, we've got Bring Your Bible to School Day. You may have heard of that.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
Live Your Faith Challenges all year long. And then Raising Highly Capable Kids, which is a resource for churches to use as an outreach within their communities as a 13-week parenting class that they can offer. It's evidence-based and values-based. And then, of course, Adventures in Odyssey, and then our broadcasts that you may have heard. So we love parents. We love coming alongside of them.
Yep, absolutely. Adventures in Odyssey, raised my kids on that. I think I enjoyed it probably more than they did, Love.
You still enjoy it,
Yeah,
right?
still
Rob?
watching, still
Yeah.
listening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great stuff. For people who want to get in touch with Focus on the Family and the parenting department specifically, what's the website?
That's focusonthefamily.com/parenting. And one thing, Ron, I'll tell you, my son, he's 17, still listens to Adventures in Odyssey while he's doing woodworking or sometimes playing basketball. And so it's fun to see that our own kids use those tools that Focus on the Family has. And we love FamilyLife. And got to tell you, as a counselor for many years, I've enjoyed your work with coming alongside of families where a huge thing has happened, where there's blended family. It's not always a crisis happening, but certainly there are plenty of challenges that are happening in those moments.
Yeah.
Appreciate your ministry.
Well, thank you. We're going to be talking today about, parenting when you've got a kid in the mix that's just in a bad place in life. Before we jump into that, I think you've got some step relationships in your extended family.
I do. My sister had 3 daughters with her first husband. It was a very, very difficult marriage. A lot of issues, multi-problem issues there in that family, going back a couple generations on the dad's side, and then 2 very strong personalities going together. And then after that, the aftermath of that has created some big issues with my 3 nieces. In fact, 2 of them have left the faith overtly and have lived with their boyfriends and have struggled in relationships. And I have another niece, the youngest one, from that first marriage that is following the Lord and has seen the devastation in her sister's lives. And my sister remarried to a wonderful man that has loved those 3 girls the best he can. They've had 2 new children, and so they have moments of togetherness. He didn't bring any kids from any previous relationship, but certainly his own style of parenting. And in our own home, we've taken in a girl the last 3 months, and so it gives us in our own home the same feel of adjusting to somebody new coming in midstream. She's 13, and we're learning to love one another in our home.
I think there's a lot of parallels between foster parenting and adoptive parenting and step parenting. I know you and I have talked about that in the past. It's not exactly the same. The family context definitely makes a difference, but there are some parallels when you're coming in midstream trying to offer something helpful to a child that's already been through some rough stuff.
I agree. And in this case, Ron, it's been interesting, the dynamic here, because it's within the family, within our very own family. So the grandparents are still involved within my wife's family and wanting control, wanting their own input. They do things differently, and we're having to put boundaries with that, just like in a blended family.
Yeah, right.
You're having to put boundaries with another family, and then the dad has been involved in drugs in the past. That's my wife's cousin, and the mom as well. So still having contact with that dad and trying to put the right boundaries, because he's more of the fun guy with our new daughter, and she's not used to any boundaries. And so that's what a lot of blended families deal with. And you see behaviors come out when there's division among the leadership, right? The ones trying to guide a child.
Yeah. Let's just spring out of that because that just gets to the reality. We've got people listening right now who are going, okay, not all of that applies to us, but yes, that's part of our situation. There's been a division in parenting and the expectations, and maybe a child has had very loose boundaries for a number of years. And here now we're trying to restore boundaries, or there's parental influences, whether it be a grandparent or a co-parent in the other household or a new step-parent in the other house or whatever. There are people that are influencing this child that's adding confusion to their world, and the child is acting out of all of that confusion. And here we are trying to shape and mold and come alongside and deal with consequences from the past, from the child's actions or somebody else's actions. And man, it just can feel overwhelming at times. Just right off the bat, let's just deal with that. What does a parent or step-parent do with that overwhelming feeling?
Yeah, you want to step back and figure out the real estate that you actually own in that, as far as emotionally and in decisions that you make. That is so important to realize. So I use this analogy, Ron, over and over again in my practice, and it's the analogy of cities. We may talk about that a little later again, but it's the idea that a mom is her own city and a dad is their own city, and they've been built over time. Each one has their own museum, their own history, and sometimes we let people into our museum to know our past, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes we just don't want to have anyone know a certain part of the museum. And then we've got certain parts of our city that people enter into, rough parts, maybe fun parts, maybe it's some mundane, but just creatively thinking of that. And then you have two spouses that over time built highways to one another and influenced one another. And then all of a sudden it's cut off. But at the same time, they're still influencing the little cities that are called their kids. And then a new city comes in and does things differently. Their culture's different, brand new museum, and they're coming in and starting to build dirt roads to these kids both ways, right? There's a blended family of these rows. And then you add extended family to that, other cities that are influencing. It becomes very overwhelming. And a lot of times there's disagreement between the two cities that used to be the parents of the original kids. And then you have still influence coming behind there. And you have a city that's divided, which is the child. And so they start to act out in certain ways. And here's a story, Ron, one that's very fresh on my mind from a counseling perspective. It's so complex, but it is a picture of many families. And it's a mom and a dad that disagree on what is best for the child. So we're trying to get a good relationship going for this young man for both parents. Both parents do not like each other. And one parent is, the dad in particular in this situation, is texting and saying all kinds of negative things towards the mom with the son and creating behaviors that are very much opposed to any type of respect towards the mom. And then the child, when he's with his mom, tries to connect with his mom in a way that's loving. And now he's developed all these other personalities, a fragmented personality where he has different voice in his head. He's lost hope in life. He feels like he can't love now because he feels so confused in this situation because of what's going on with the parents. So owning your own real estate, how can I love my child well? What do I have control over? And recognizing that my child or my children need me all in, loving them and guiding them in a loving way to learn how to love both parents and encouraging them.
And if the bridge is out to one of the other major cities, we got to try to repair that.
Yes. I mean, from a biblical perspective, that makes perfect sense. You build that and it's healthy for the child. It may feel like you lose a little bit of love from your child and maybe you're wanting that control. And so you have to figure out in your own city, why are you needing so much of your child's love? Why is that? What's going on in your city that you're trying to repair through your children that you've lost from your spouse potentially? And that's where you need to go get the help you need and surround yourself with people that can help you repair within your city so you're not relying so much of the input on your kids and not able to encourage their connectedness with the spouse. Now, there are certain situations, right, Ron, where
Yeah.
that other spouse is in a really bad spot,
Yeah.
and you don't necessarily want to encourage that connection.
Right. That's so good. I was just thinking there's another application of that bridge analogy. If the other major city is one of the parents, maybe it's a former spouse, maybe it's parent or step-parent in your own home, whoever you're married to, and there's been a rift between the two of you. You got to rebuild that bridge too, so that the two of you are more on the same page and not putting the kid, back to your example, putting the kid back into a situation where you're manipulating or playing games through the child. That's going to just constantly keep that child in a state of, I don't know who to please. If I'm loving mom, I'm not pleasing dad. If I'm loving dad, I'm not pleasing mom. So repairing that mom-dad connection or parent-step-parent, whatever the case is, it seems to me that would be very important.
I agree, Ron. Otherwise, the child's city is going to look like a war zone.
Wow.
Because you're trying to get at the other parent to let the other parent know how much they hurt you or how much you hate what they did. And the child is the one that suffers. And if you go into their city, there's confusion, there are buildings that are half built, there's a child that is hurting, and parents can't see that because they're just wanting to get to that other city to attack. And so, yeah, you're right. That bridge is key, and that is hard. That is hard.
Okay, so I want to pull back for a second. I want to chase what you just said. The child is hurting. Danny, one of the things that I hear people do sometimes when they talk about blended families is talk about all the bad news, and they throw out stats and they just leave the stats sitting there. And I got to tell you, if you were a parent or a step-parent in that situation, you would feel hopeless. Things like kids in blended families. Now, this is true. Let me preface what I'm about to say to the listener. This is true, but we're going to get underneath it about why it's true. And that's what's going to be important here. Saying things like kids in blended families compared to children in two biological parent homes, being raised by their biological parents. Kids in blended families have higher rates of aggression and depression and behavioral problems and do a little more poorly in school academically. On the whole, in general, compared to kids growing up in a biological nuclear family. We just leave that there as if to say, this is all kids, this is why, blended families are bad, or, all those judgmental messages that come through that are inappropriate and wrong, because the quality of the relationships in any home, single parent home, biological home, adoptive family home, foster family home, blended family home, the quality of relationships at the end of the day has more to do with why we see some of those things in children. It's not the structure of the home that is going to equal where you're going to have a messed up kid, right? I think that is an inappropriate use of those stats. But what I think is more important to do is to get underneath it and go, okay, so sometimes kids in blended families have a reason to be a little more depressed than the average teenage kid. And it's, I think, related to the kinds of hurt that they have experienced, the kinds of transition that's created some instability in their world, in their life, a parent who's not as involved or engaged as a result of parental divorce, for example, and just the sadness and the hurt that comes along with those changes, transitions, unwanted transitions. And so we got to get inside that. I think it's easy for a step-parent who's kind of new on the scene to look at their spouse's kid going, man, you got a messed up child right there. No, let's get underneath it. Like, why is that kid hurting? What's going on? What's the backstory? And then what do we do with that? Okay, just react to that, Danny. Is that fitting? Is that a good place for us to start?
Oh, it is. I call those "that wasn't supposed to happen" moments. It wasn't designed that way. And think about that wasn't supposed to happen moments as parents, just a regular day.
Yep.
You have a reactiveness to it.
Yes.
And when you have a that wasn't supposed to happen moment that's so big, it really creates a big reaction in a child's life when their life is lived off of emotions rather than experience. They don't have much experience to draw from, and they assume that life is always going to be this way. They think in terms of, I wonder if my parents are ever going to get back together. I wish they would get back together. I wonder if my dad still loves me because he's gone, or I wonder if my mom still loves me. And so they're wondering these things behind the scenes and interpreting life from those questions.
Right.
And they're looking for data, right? They're looking for information to help them with all this interpreting that's going on. And on top of that, they have the other pressures, and then they notice the kids that have things intact. They don't necessarily compare themselves with kids that have similar situations. They want that, but they usually notice how much better other people's lives are. And they unfortunately don't get as much of the bids for connection responded to by the parents. They bid for the connection. They're like, hey, pay attention to me. I'm hurting. And over time, they have this helpless feeling that, my mom, she's sad. I don't want to upset her. Or my dad, he's busy. I don't want to bug him. And they don't see their emotions as that important. And so they step back and they start to try to deal with it in their own world. And that wasn't supposed to happen moments start to pile up. And unfortunately, some kids, Ron, the one thing you didn't mention there is that suicide rate is also higher.
Yeah, right.
And they think, okay, I don't have any hope. It's always going to be this way. And then they hop out. And I've heard parents afterwards saying, I didn't see this coming, whether it be drugs or other things. And it's because they were so involved in their own world that they missed what was happening in that child's world.
That connects to, let's unpack this, because there's so much of what you just said. Bids for connection. For somebody who's not familiar with that terminology, explain that a little bit.
Yeah, a bid for connection is really what it sounds like. Somebody bidding for connection with you, wanting a connection point with you. So it could be a smile. That could be a bid for connection. It could be a wave. It can be a tug. And our new daughter, 13, she has ADHD and some other things going on, and she'll come and just stare at you. And that's a bid for connection. Like, I am here. Can you pay attention to me? So I have to literally stop, look at her. Hey, what do you need from me right now?
Yeah.
I'd love to meet that if I can. Or, hey, can you give me 2 minutes? I need to finish this, and then I'll be all in with you. I know you want to connect. You want to talk about something clearly. And so let's talk. And so it's a parent being aware enough. But, I've noticed a lot of parents lose appetite. They are trying to navigate a new job, and many hours of work. They're tired. They're exhausted. Then they have the emotional reality of the other spouse potentially doing some things, and then trying to connect with new kids, a new spouse. And it's so much that they say, I miss those bids for connection. My child is giving me these hints and I miss them. And so for you, it's give yourself grace, but pause and try to notice. Put pause buttons all over your house. And that'll just remind you, I need to look at my child's face. I need to look in their eyes. I need to visit their city. I can't just be focused on my own city. I got to go into their city and see what's going on.
Driving by and waving at the city is not the same as entering the city and going into the park and sitting down and going, hey, what's going on?
Yes.
And connecting with that. No, that's so good. And I think the other side of this that parents need to understand is that in the midst of the confusion and transition and change, kids often, in my clinical experience, and I'm curious what yours is as well, kids of all ages, young, old, teenagers, even adults, recognize that mom's under a lot of pressure. Mom's trying to figure this stuff out. Mom's got stuff at work. COVID's still in the air. Mom's trying to figure out how to be a stepmom to my step siblings now. I don't want to burden her. I don't want to bother her. Or I'm concerned that she's already irritated with me. I don't want to make it worse. So I don't really make overt, easy to understand bids for connection. I either do nothing and hide it and just get isolated and feel more alone, or I do a bid for connection in anger, something irritating. Do you see that in the kids you work with?
Oh, yeah, or acting out.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be in school, acting out. They don't know how to handle the fact that they're not able to bid for connection with somebody that they love. And unfortunately, many teens, their bids for connection go to other friends and other places over time, and then a parent laments the fact that they don't have very good connection with their teens. But that's where the bid for connection now comes from the parent. And you have to be persistent and steadfast in that and not give up, because you already experienced rejection in a spouse.
Yes.
Potentially, right? That's not all blended families,
Right.
but in the case that's real, the reality that some spouses are rejected, you may already experience those feelings of rejection, then you're experiencing it with your teens or teen, and then you have to bid for connection, putting those fears of rejection aside because you're persistent, understanding that it's not personal. This child's just trying to find connectedness somewhere and stability. And maybe it's finding it in friendships, which is totally normal developmental stage. But you can really step in intentionally and have those bids with your child, planning some consistent things. And over time, your child will enjoy those. But you have to be patient with that.
So I think what we're saying here is both prevention and intervention. Prevention for those families that are listening and going, well, we don't really have a kid who's acting out. But moving toward your child, seeing their bids for connection, creating opportunities to connect with them, even when they don't seem to be asking for it, is prevention, because that is, at the end of the day, what our kids want most from us. They just want us sitting in the park with them, throwing the Frisbee, being in their city and being a part of them. This is also intervention for families who do have a kid they're struggling with. It's always a good idea to move toward that child emotionally, physically. Now, sometimes they got a stiff arm out and they're really angry and they're not going to let you in because of something that's happened. There's a repair that's needed. But in general, Danny, would you say to somebody who's struggling with a child, look, always look for the opportunities to move toward them?
Yes. Even when there's pushback, rejection, drug use, withdrawal, when they're bragging about everything that they can brag about, they're in their own different way and personality. They're looking and they desire deep down that pursuit, that connection, the affirmation. They're looking for a sense of belonging, a sense of competence, that I'm good at something.
Yeah.
And so just recognize that as a parent. Figure out what your own triggers are. If you feel a certain emotion towards your child that disconnects you from them, figure out where that's coming from and maybe talk with a friend about it or process it, journal about it. Your role is to visit that city consistently and go in and ask questions and have curiosity and say, I wonder what's going on in your thought bubbles. I'm seeing all these other things. What's going on in your thought bubbles? I'd love to see them. I can't see them. I have to rely on you telling me all about them. And I'm sure there are a lot of them that you're not telling me. And I'd love to hear about that whole thought world. Maybe we can meet up at the train station. Our trains of thought can have a meeting somewhere. We can have an appointment, and at the train station of our trains of thought, we can meet up together. I'd love to hear what's going on in your thought world.
Okay, I can hear somebody listening right now pushing back a little bit going, oh, I would love to do that. I've tried. It's a dead-end street. See, I'm catching on to your analogy.
Nice. I love it.
I like that. It's a dead-end street. And I don't want to drive down that dead end anymore. Boy, does my kid know how to trigger me. Like you just said, they use emotion and triggers my emotion, and then we are really off in a bad place. Let's talk around parents getting hooked by the negative emotions and the stuff that kids throw at us. What do we do when we get triggered?
Well, so I give parents permission to have 5 timeouts, right? So, or more,
In a minute or a day or a week or what? How many?
I would say in a day.
Okay.
In a day.
5 in a day.
And I do this sometimes for myself. I know it's going to be a big day of me having to get things done, and so you put up a sheet of paper wherever you're going to be able to access that and put a timeout, because it's a great example for your kids. And going to for a 5-minute, 10-minute, 30-second timeout, it's a reset of your mind. You're pressing the reset button because you're the adult, and they're going to rely on you managing those emotions. And you got to catch your brain. Sometimes just picture your brain running around the room and you're trying to chase it down. You need to take a time out to grab it, put it back in so that you can think and connect with your child. I remember this one phone call, Ron, that we got in the counseling department. This mom called. She locked herself in the bathroom and was crying. She was screaming. She said, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to hurt my kids. I feel like beating them. And those were penetrating words for me. I was going, oh, wow, she's in a bad spot. And she said, I'm alone. I'm afraid. It was a blended family type situation. She was hating the moment, and she needed to regain perspective, but she was keeping her kids safe from her. And I commended her for that. You made a very good choice. You knew what was happening in your emotions, and you separated yourself from your kids. You could hear them banging on the door, calling out for her. She was overwhelmed. But in calming down her emotions and gaining perspective, the bigger picture was so important. So having that resource of maybe a friend or another person you can call, go into the bathroom if it's really getting overwhelming, and get some perspective in the moment can be helpful, so you regain composure and you're able to come back with your mind.
I really like that. I mean, obviously in that crisis moment, she needed to lock herself in the bathroom. But I think the bigger takeaway for the rest of us is, yeah, I'm responsible for how I'm reacting. And if I catch myself getting angry, flying off the handle, losing charge of myself, I need to calm down. I need to figure out a way to talk myself down from this. Pray like crazy. God, help me calm down. Because you and I both know the thinking part of our brain shuts off. This applies to your teenager as well, your child of any age. Thinking brain shuts off when we get dysregulated. We stop thinking and we just start reacting. And I got to calm down so I can start thinking again.
Yeah, in a good way, one very simple tool that you can use starting today is go. We all need to be hydrated, especially wintertime. It gets dry. Go get a drink of water and stare out the window and just picture the Holy Spirit just pouring in as you're drinking water and letting your mind just rest in the moment. You're bringing in an extra ounce of that Holy Spirit. Maybe it's a quick prayer. So don't react. Go drink a glass of water while you're staring out the window and then come back to the conversation, especially with a teenager that's trying to push your buttons and trying to get you going. That's where you don't want to give up any power in that. You have to let the teen know it's not up for grabs. I'm in control of me, and over time that's going to be respected. But you have to show that reset and come in with you in control, so that the child knows that they can't push your buttons to a place where they gain control. They're coming out of anger, and they're potentially gonna push you until you break, and they've won. Their anger has won, and they feel better about it, and they like that you're miserable now. And so just take a drink of water and come back to the moment.
I want to connect some dots for our listener. Let's connect the early part of our conversation with what Danny just said. Remember, this kid's hurting. There's something going on. And sometimes they're blaming you for all the struggles that they've had in life. Sometimes they're just mad at the world because of the things that have happened in their life, their family, et cetera, whatever it might be. The stuff you can't control, still, it's got to come out on somebody. And so out of that hurt, they react. And sometimes, yeah, they're trying to just ignite you into responding, reacting in some backward way so that you'll move toward them, so that they can be heard, so that somebody will care about what they're hurting over. That is so difficult to maintain yourself, to put on gentleness. I'm thinking fruit of the Spirit here. Peace, patience, and gentleness in that moment, like to calm down enough to be there to continue to love them, but yet to see past the hurt and the anger, the outside stuff, and see what's on the inside. But I gotta ask you, man, because anybody in that situation feels disrespected by a child, whether it's your child or stepchild, whatever. How do you wrestle with that? This kid is just totally disrespecting me. And I'm supposed to respond with gentleness and quiet, be calm. And there's something in me anyway. I'm revealing something about me. Maybe somebody else listening. That just is hard to do. I want respect first, then I'll respond with love. But I don't think we can do it that way.
Boy, that's a complicated one, Ron.
Yeah,
I think our human nature is the reality there, and it feels helpless. It feels powerless in the moment. And so notice I said feels. You have a lot of power by showing self-control. And so when you show that, you show a lot of power that over time is going to be respected. And it doesn't mean there isn't a consequence. You're still the parent. You still bring the consequence. You're not looking for happiness. You're looking for connection. And it's going to be shown in that warmth and sensitivity and love with compassion. Emotions don't have to be contagious. What you can do is take a deep breath. And even if you need to stare at their eyes or stare somewhere to regulate yourself, and that's a good way to regulate, by the way, your emotions, just stare at one spot and take a deep breath and remind yourself of what the bigger picture is here, that you are showing self-control, and that's regaining the power of the moment, because those moments will accumulate over time, and over time that child is going to respect you. If you lose it, you've lost even more ground on any type of potential connection.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the way you're saying that. You're retaining your power in that moment. And you are. If you start reacting as much as they're reacting, now they've got another reason to disrespect you in their mind, in the child's mind.
Yeah, and figure out a way you can have a squeeze ball close by or all over the house or whatever you need to regulate yourself. Some people put things in their pocket or chew gum. Little subtle things that help remind you, I got to manage me. I got to be all in. Maybe it's that drink of water, and you regain perspective that when the kids are the most unlovable, that's when they require the most love from you. That's truly when you're being a loving person. And so every night, pray for that extra refill from God on how you can love deeply and in a steadfast way. That means immovable, unshakable, and that will transform your home over time. This is a hurting child where their city, if you can picture this, is had an earthquake, and they're trying to rebuild, and they are angry. And so them not listening to you is generalized to all their hurts are probably being brought to you, and they need somebody to blame, and you're the easiest one. They're angry because of what has happened. They can't even pinpoint it. And the more you can just respond with warmth and gentleness and love, like you're saying, the fruit of the Spirit, moments will change over time. And maybe that's that support system you need to regroup, but also agreeing with your spouse what boundaries need to be there so that you also provide consequences along the way, some boundaries to what's being done, what's being said, so that the things don't get out of control.
Is it possible to do both of those, set boundaries and be gentle?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be in that moment of emotion. It can be when something's asked, you say, well, I'd love to really develop trust between us, and I'd love to develop relationship. Here's some of the things that you made a decision to go against in our home. These are the values we've got, and you went against it. Here's what we've agreed on is the consequence to that. Maybe it's not going out with friends. And again, I mean, counseling is probably going to, in this situation, counseling would be helpful. Somebody from an objective standpoint helping mediate that. And I can tell you, a lot of teens have come into my office and say, I don't want to be here. I don't see why I need to be here. Yeah. This is my parents' problem. I'm not the problem. Yet they do agree that they want a life that's different. And so the sooner they fire the counselor, the better. Right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's right. We'll work ourselves out of a job. That's what we're trying to do. I like the way you cast that, so the parent can say, I do want to consider your request, but here's some things that you've done, and so here's some boundaries I'm going to have to set. But this is all a conversation about how you can regain my trust, and so work back to a place where that thing you asked for, that thing you wanted to do, for example, is something we can work towards. Like that is drawing on the motivation of the child in a way to say, let's work on this together. It's giving them some hope. I think when kids feel like, man, there's no hope. Nobody's listening to me. Nobody cares. There's no way I'm going to honor your boundaries because what's the point?
Yeah, and it gets messy. As a parent, what you can do is remember what's important to that child that you're trying to connect with. If it's a stepchild that's bringing a lot of anger towards you and blaming a lot of things on you, be persistent and remember those things that they love, and not to make it a kid-centric home, but to show that you care deeply about what they think, who they are, and getting to know them. And if you guys can incorporate one-on-one times with something that is of interest to you and to the child and taking turns, that is good. Again, we don't want to create a narcissistic type of undertow in the house, but the child's going to need to learn how to love back as well. You just need to be persistent. I want to use that word. Steadfast is actually one of my favorite words. Yeah.
That's good. Well, I know sometimes parents who are in the mode of we got to set boundaries stop also looking for opportunities to do something fun with the child. It's almost as if I've got to be completely boundary parent and I can't be soft, loving parent. Like it's one or the other. Well, no. I mean, you can wrap some of the fun moments around the fact that you're saying, no, we're not going to do that. And that's the delicate balance. But I hear you saying when parents strive for that, it over time can help soften the child and open them back up again. Let me turn the corner to a little bit different scenario. What if the child's anger towards a parent or step-parent is completely justified? They are indignant about something the parent has done. Let's say you're a biological parent and you've been MIA for a while, and now you're coming back into a child's life. Or you have burdened your child, as you were talking earlier, and you've made them responsible for communicating with the other household, your co-parent, and they've had to carry the burden of this conflict between the two major cities, and it's just been hard and a pain and a burden, and now you're wanting to, make it better or something. Or a scenario I've run into many times, you had an affair. You ended your family because of an affair. You've now married the affairee, and that's your blended family, and the child is going, I just can't accept this. It's almost like I'm giving, mom or dad a pass on their actions, and if I get happy about this new family. What does a parent do then?
Well, realize that when a child is in that inflexible type of mindset, and that's what I'll call it, inflexible, that it's you require justice. You've done wrong. You have wronged me. They will usually move against you. That's just a natural, inflexible tendency of the mind. So a child's just thinking, this is how justice happens. Or they may cling to the other parent to be safe, depending on the age and personality. But what a parent needs to do is come with a humble heart that says, I have done wrong. You are absolutely right. And accepting that, coming with an open, teachable heart, repentant, but not constantly. You ask for forgiveness. You don't plead for it. You ask for it. You say, I'm sorry. Knowing what I know now, I would do things differently, or whatever that may be. But bringing honest desire and genuine desire for connection, and knowing that it's going to take time to repair. You're going to have to be patient. It could take a couple of years, maybe even 3 years. But that persistence of you showing that you're a different person is going to give new information to that child to interpret who you are differently, right? At this point, there's justice that needs to be served, and the sentence is never long enough for that, and realize that. And so sometimes the question is, what do you need from me to make things better? And the child usually doesn't know what to answer. Well, I wish you wouldn't have done that. I understand that, and I'm asking for that forgiveness. Do you think you can do that? And sometimes they'll say, no. And you say, I get that. Let me know if you change your mind or when that happens. And just know that I love you. I would die for you. I still want to connect with you. And I hope we can continue to do that. And then following through with your commitments, even if it's going to hurt, if you're going to feel the rejection, prepare yourself emotionally for that. And the more persistent and steadfast you're in the relationship with that type of emotion, you will, over time, begin to see a difference in how they respond to you, because then you're trustworthy, you're following through, you're showing that you're doing what you're saying, and they will see the difference over time. They'll be watching you, but know that your role is coming with a humble and repentant heart as you try to build that bridge. And they may grenade it, build it again, right? And just say, hey, just a reminder, I really love you, want to connect with you. But you don't have to keep admitting to the fault over and over and over and over again to regain love. That's never going to really do any good, and it's going to make you feel worse, and they'll punish you more and more. It's having a moment of special connection where you repent to that and you talk to them and you ask for forgiveness. And beyond that, you love consistently and you're able to reference back, hey, remember when we talked about this one that I asked for forgiveness? Well, that's our starting point of something new between us that I'm hoping you're willing to open up as a new chapter between us. And can we close the previous chapter and just have a conclusion to that? Open a new one. Maybe we can title it a new chapter. And with kids that are creative, you can do that. You can say, hey, what could we title this new chapter that we can start to write together? Because the previous chapter was super messy, but there's a new chapter that we can write.
We keep coming back to the term steadfast love. I know that's one of the qualities you talk about in your new book. Let's come back to that here in just a minute. But before we do, I got one more little scenario. One household is concerned about a child's behavior. They're wrestling with a child who's struggling, but the other home is not wrestling about it. So the behavior is acceptable in the child's second home. It's not acceptable in your home. I've worked in this area long enough to know there is no easy answer to this one. But I'd love for you and I to just kick it around a little bit. And what are some of the things that we can be mindful of, that parents can be thinking about? What are some things they can do?
Yeah, it's a conversation around questions. And you said it. It's very complicated, but very common, unfortunately. This scenario where there's one parent that has an emotional need to be very permissive because they want a best friend and they really want to, their goal is to make their child happy. And they feel bad that they're in this situation. And so they feel like, I just need to make them happy. We can have fun together. We can watch R-rated movies or whatever we want to watch and let them be happy, because then I can be the cool parent and be loved. There's a lot of need there for that parent, and realize that with compassion, that there's a lot of emptiness to that. What I like to counsel the parent that is not doing that with is maintain your goal as growth and maturity for your child. That's a gift you're giving your child. That is a gift. It's not happiness is not a destination. Happiness is a life that's mature, relational, connected to God. You will experience happy moments, and that's fantastic to want for our children, but that's not a destination. And so a good conversation to have with a child is, why do you think I put boundaries? Do you think happiness is really something you can pursue and find? Or is that something that just is up to you? Because somebody can be happy about a cheesecake and somebody can be happy about ice cream. And we can be happy about different things. And so, but that's up to us on what we're happy about. And so how do you see me as a parent? What do you need from me as your parent? And here's a set of questions that I recommend you follow maybe weekly. What is going well for you? What is going well for us as a family? What is not going well for you? What's not going well for us as a family? And then what do you need from me to make things better? And then what do we need to do differently in order to do things well in our home? Have them respond to that and then write down the responses in a notebook. It gives you a journey of conversation where you align your minds together.
I can see what you're doing is you're moving towards the heart of your child in that conversation, trying to open them up and engage them and figure out what's going on. No matter what the answers are, you're still moving toward their heart, which is, again, adding to your influence. And if the other home has a tremendous influence in a negative direction, you want to make sure you're maintaining your influence in a positive one.
Yes, and that's so hard because some kids that want to have anger, they have anger and they want to get their way, they start to want to be with that other parent more frequently. Yeah. And that's the unfortunate result of this.
Yeah, that's where freedom is, right? I can go and do whatever I want to do there. Yeah.
And that's a central question right there, Ron. I love that. What is freedom? Is freedom getting to do whatever we want, or do we become more enslaved to the fact that we're looking for something that we never find? And so helping children define certain things, develop a worldview, and have your home be balanced between warmth, sensitivity, connectedness, that worldview teaching, and rules and boundaries, because over time your child will know that that is the right thing. That is the best thing for them. They will know that. And you can even ask them, what does it mean to be loving when it comes to parenting? And many kids will be able to tell you what it is.
What occurs to me is that dialogue you're taking your child through is essentially like Proverbs. Are we choosing wisdom here, or are we choosing foolishness? And without saying it, you're inviting them into wisdom. You're inviting them to see life from a better perspective rather than the, hey, I just want to have fun and have, my freedoms sort of a thing. You're reframing that as, well, that can be enslaving. Wisdom would help you to see it that way. Now, I just want to say to the listener, yes, that's a good strategy. That is teaching them to think biblically about themselves and their world. And it puts the child in a place where they then recognize that, well, this house is rooted in wisdom and this other house is rooted in foolishness. And if we're successful in helping our kids begin to think that way, they're going to have more maturity than the leaders of the other home, ironically enough. And that creates its own bind in a way where you're kind of living beyond where your parent is living. But I never think it's the wrong thing to do. Now, to out and out call the other home foolishness, that would be creating a loyalty bind and probably just add hurt to your child's heart and undo what you're trying to do. So we're not talking about that. We aren't talking about inviting them towards wisdom. That's always a helpful thing to do.
And Ron, you just mentioned my other favorite word of all time, invitation. The word invitation, I love that you used that and you brought that into this, because we're inviting our child into something, and invitation means you're responding to that. And a good question would be is, what are you being invited into in another home? What am I inviting you into? Let's talk about the differences. And in my invitation, what will the future you say about this invitation I'm giving you? Will they thank us for this invitation that you accept in what I'm inviting you into in this home? What are the differences between our home? We do things differently in our two cities. And I'm hoping that, as you know, as we're building our culture together, our connectedness between our two cities, that I'm inviting you into something that is transforming to you, because I want the very best for you. I would die for you. And so you know that my intentions are not to control you, but to guide you towards something very special for you, because God's inviting you into something even bigger. And so I want to lead you towards that invitation that the Heavenly Father of this universe has for you. And I want you to find it. And there's so many things that will try to distract you from that grand invitation in God's kingdom. And that my role as a parent is to lead you towards that invitation so that you can see clearly and follow Christ.
Danny, that is so, so good. Emulate God's invitation by inviting your children. We have to say it. I think when we feel desperate over a way our child is behaving and we feel out of control, I think the temptation is to get more controlling as a parent, to get more demanding as a parent. And the posture difference between being a demanding parent and being an inviting parent is completely different. A demanding parent is my way now, I insist, you're going to do it whether you like it or not. And that's just going to generate resistance, in particular in a child who's already hurting. You move away from them and they move away from you. You've lost influence. But an invitation that is gentle, that leaves it to them, that acknowledges and respects them as a person, but then it is warmth and it's attractive and gentle. I mean, that's the way of grace and mercy. That's so much more attractive than demanding.
Yeah, invitation is something that kids are very familiar with when they're being invited to parties, to kids' houses. And a good question for yourself is, am I an inviting parent? What's it like to be with me? And do I bring grace into the mix, just like Christ has done through his salvation invitation for us? It's filled with grace, forgiveness, compassion. And he even said it. He said, they don't know what they're doing. Father, forgive them. But that was his invitation. That was his open invitation to the world. And as parents, we can be a model to that, give invitation to something that is in our home, and how inviting is our home. That's what we have control over. How inviting is it to be with me? Am I present, full in my mind, my emotions? Do I make time to spend together? Those types of things are very inviting. Do I pay attention and actually listen carefully when my child is talking to me?
Your new book is 7 Traits of Effective Parenting. I'm going to read the 7 traits here in just a minute, but I want our listener to know we've already been talking in and around and through these. We've been applying some of these big concepts to a situation where there's a troubled child in your family system. But they also apply to just good parenting, effective, preventive parenting that's just trying to help children grow. And so let me just read these off. Listener, you're going to recognize again some of them because they've come up in the conversation. But Danny, let's just talk around how parents in general can apply a couple of these to their children. So adaptability, and this is all about parents. Now, I want to point that out. I think a lot of times parenting books say this is the kind of thing you want to create in your child. You're saying, no, it's us as parents. This is how we need to be so that we're doing a good job in parenting. I love that. Okay, adaptability, respect, intentionality, steadfast love, we've definitely hit that one. Boundaries, grace and forgiveness, and gratitude. Now, there's a couple of these that I don't know that we've talked about specifically yet, but I just want to ask you about respect for a minute. We've kind of talked around that, respecting a child, what if they're disrespecting you? But what in general are you saying here? Why is respect a good quality for parents to have?
Well, using the analogy of the city, it's what's going on in your own city and the output of that. So what am I thinking? That's where respect begins. What are my own thought bubbles? How am I using my eyes? Am I really looking at the person in their eyes and showing respect to the fact that what they're saying is important? How am I using my hands respectfully? Am I serving my family? How I discipline, how I use my hands, how I listen. Many times we have so many things going on in our minds that we don't listen attentively, and we forget or we re-ask the same question, and that quickly leads to disconnection with a child because they feel unimportant. And so it's respect that I'm aware of what's going on inside of me, I'm reflective of that, and I'm open to constructive feedback, and then I remember things that are important, that need to be remembered, and then I respond instead of react to what's going on. So you mentioned the word gentleness. I picture gentleness and respect going together, that you have strength, but with self-control. And that self-control is I'm controlling me so that I can connect well with you. I remember a story of a dad and his family. We were at, I think it was Disney World, I guess the claimed to be the happiest place in the world, right?
or the most miserable place in the world.
Yeah, that's right. And so I'm looking across the way as we're getting ready to get on the roller coaster, and this teenage boy had forgotten his stuff in the little cubby, the locker thing. And the attendant said, "Hey, you forgot your stuff." And the dad turned around and said, "Hey, you're so stupid," and just slapped him upside the head in front of all of us.
Wow.
And you could see this big teenager, taller than his dad, just kind of fold down and just his self-esteem go down. I don't know. That was just parenting. I don't know if it wasn't a blended family necessarily, but it was just a moment where you noticed absolute disrespect from the part of the parent. And what it created in that moment is a sorrow and compassion for that child. But I can't imagine what that relationship is like. There's just fear towards that parent. And that was not effective parenting. He communicated something that was destructive to that child's city, and future connections are affected by what the parent did.
We all have our bad moments. We all do things like that where we immediately go, that was not supposed to happen, right? Like you said earlier. But a parent who does that sort of thing over and over and over and over is really just diminishing their own influence with their child. I mean, the child can't trust you, can't see you as a safe person. And so the values you're trying to instill in them, they're not tuning into that. They're tuning out, I would think.
Yeah, and one thing that parents can do immediately with this culture of respect and setting up in their home, put up a list maybe on your refrigerator, at the kitchen table, and write out what are life-giving words, and make your home a place where the words that you use are life-giving because words are so powerful. And so the other one I didn't mention there is your tongue. How do you use your mouth towards the other spouse, the ex-spouse, towards the other children? How are you using your mouth to set a story in place and make sure the culture in your home is life-giving? That's respectful. That brings God's love into the mix. And add to that vocabulary. Have your kids add to it and say, oh, boy, that was a life-giving word. Let's add that to our list. And then you have a list that's expanding over time, and kids will be able to remember those words as you're continuing to expand that. And have celebrations as you're expanding that list. If you hit a milestone of 20 life-giving words, hey, let's go out to eat. Let's celebrate the fact that we're having life-giving words in our home. And then you hit the next milestone at 40. You say, hey, let's go out to a movie, or let's rent a movie, camp out in our family room, because we are bringing life-giving words into our home, and that's what this home's about.
Let's do one more. Gratitude. Why is it important for parents to have gratitude?
Oh, man, that's a key one. That's a reset of the mind. It really, truly makes room for peacefulness in your home. You're grateful for even adversity. I remember reading in James recently, he said, James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ, and he said, let's have joy in all circumstances of various kinds. They don't have to be fully difficult, but in all circumstances, let's find joy. And he came with a heart of gratitude. Gratitude helps our mind control our brain. Our brain can get out of control and out of whack, but our mind, in a grateful state, can help the brain regroup itself so that you can be present in the moment that God has for you. And maybe it's a growing moment, maybe it's a difficult moment, and that's when you need your brain the most, and that's when we lose it the most. And so the gratitude helps us line up potentially with God's will in that moment, and that can be transforming.
Man, that is really profound. I'm going to have to chew on that one. Gratitude helps your mind control your brain. Yeah, wow. That is really good. When you're resetting how you're thinking about your own life, your own circumstances, I could see so many little thoughts that if I entertain them, it makes it harder for me to tune into my child, for example, or to, if I'm thinking about something they have not become that I hoped that they would become, now I'm not grateful for my child. I'm almost resenting who they are, and I'm not available to them. I'm not really tuning into them. I'm kind of living under pain that this is reality. Boy, that is a deep one, man.
Yeah, Ron, I mean, gratitude helps us see all moments as invitations from God for us to step into them with him. And he says, hey, I'm there with you no matter what. I'm steadfast as a loving God to you. Let's step into it together, as hard as it is. And for instance, let's go as simple as washing dishes, and you're doing that mundane day in, day out. Brother Lawrence has said that's an opportunity to practice the presence of God, and that's a gratitude, and you see it as an opportunity to serve rather than an inconvenience to your day, and it shifts your whole experience of the moment with just simple things like that. But in a disagreement with your child, you're grateful for the opportunity to influence them through God's love in a moment that feels adversarial. But if you can shift your mind towards gratitude, hey, I'm grateful I can be here with this child in this very moment where they're having emotions spill out. They're smelly emotions. They're smelling up the room. And I'm going to plug up my nose and go into this emotional nastiness that's happening. And I'm grateful that I get to do it with God with me as I penetrate this child's soul. And that's when you start to regulate your brain, your child's brain has more chance of regulating as well.
Okay, one last question. And I'm sure there's not one right answer to this, but I'm curious, which of these traits do you think is consistently most difficult for the average parent? Adaptability, respect, intentionality, steadfast love, boundaries, grace and forgiveness, and gratitude. You've been listening to my conversation with Danny Huerta. I'm Ron Deal, and this This is Family Life Blended. Maybe you're thinking right now about which of those qualities is most difficult for you. We'll hear Danny's response to my question in just a minute. Do you remember at one point Danny suggested that we as parents, in order to calm ourselves and refocus our responses to our kids, he said, take a drink of water and use that moment to pray, to remind ourselves of what we're called to as parents, to, in effect, he said, drink in the Holy Spirit for a few minutes so we can parent better. Do you remember when he said that? Well, that's the same idea behind Paul's admonition in Philippians 4, 8, and 9. Listen to this. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. You could almost just hear Paul saying, drink in the Holy Spirit around these things. And then Paul continues, what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Okay, let's get the process. Listen to what Paul says. Number one, think on these things. Now, in order to do that, you have to study. You have to know what God's truth is. You have to know what is loving, what is honorable, what a just response might look like in a particular situation with our children. So we have to drink in the Holy Spirit's teaching about what those things look like. And then number two, Paul says, you got to put it into practice, right? Rubber meets the road at that point. So we have to walk out the loving behavior, in this case with our children. We have to practice calming down. We have to manage our own triggers so we can respond based on truth. And here's the cool thing. Notice Paul's observation that the God of peace is with us the entire time. He's empowering, he's guiding, he's bringing courage and wisdom. And by the way, I think that also means he brings peace to the interaction, to the process, and to the outcome of what happens when we parent according to his truth. Now, here's the bonus of this passage. Not only does this help us respond better in the moment to a difficult child, for example, but it becomes a model to our children of how they are to respond. We have to show them truth in action so they can experience the beauty of truth in action, and over time, they learn what is honorable, what is just, what is pure, what is lovely and commendable and excellent and worthy of praise. In other words, first, parent yourself, and in so doing, you parent your child. If you'd like more information about my guest, you'll find it in the show notes, or you can just check it out on the Family Life Blended podcast page at familylife.com/blended podcast. And while you're there, check out everything Family Life has for your marriage and family. Our division, Family Life Blended, has the world's largest collection of articles, videos, resources, books for blended families. Books like Step Parenting with Grace by one of our team staff members, Gayla Grace, and my book, Dating and the Single Parent. Check us out. The show notes will tell you how. And hey, would you mind taking 30 seconds right now and writing us a quick review? I love hearing from our listeners. One man wrote on Facebook, the Smart Step Family book was recommended to us by our premarital counselor, and I just recently discovered this podcast. I listen on my commute to and from work, and it has helped in incredible ways. If you are a blended family, he says, whether it's going good or bad, you need this podcast in your life. Tim also gave us a quick review. He said, as an adult child of divorce, Family Life Blended has given me a framework to understand why I feel the way I do when certain things unfold. Thank you, he says. Well, we're glad to make a difference in your life, and we'd love to hear from other listeners as well. You can subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done so already on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Just search Family Life Blended, and you can also listen on YouTube. Remember to look at the show notes for links to additional resources, and you'll also learn about the other podcasts that we have on the Family Life Podcast Network. Now, each spring, we put on a worldwide one-day live stream enrichment event for step couples called Blended and Blessed. put this on your calendar, Saturday, April 24th. I really want you to join us for our next one. Saturday, April 24th, 2021. Our Blended and Blessed theme this year is Walk in Love, and it's going to include new presentations from dynamic speakers and lots of learning opportunities. And here's the cool part. You can attend as a couple all by yourself in the comfort of your home. Churches can also host the event and bring blended family couples together. Even if you do that just virtually, you're still getting together to help build a ministry in your church and community. Learn all about that at blendedandblessed.com. That's blendedandblessed.com. Now, before we're done, let's get back to Danny Huerta and hear his answer to what he thinks is most difficult for parents to consistently maintain in their parenting.
Boundaries is clearly the winner of that. With our assessment that we have, it's a free assessment at focusonthefamily.com/7 traits. It's a great starting point for parents, by the way. Boundaries is consistently the one that parents score the lowest on and really disagree on in the home. It's so easy to disagree on. There's so many nuances to boundaries. You look at age and stage, you look at personality differences, you look at moment differences, just adding the phone, social media, you add friendships to that, different types of friends, and man, boundaries are so complex for parents. You have to have a lot of energy, wisdom, awareness of what your child needs. You have to be all in when you're trying to do boundaries. And then you have to model them on yourself in the home. So if you're putting a boundary, one of them came up recently, my son's starting to drive, and he was going 10 over, and at times 15 over the speed limit. And my wife said, hey, you can't be doing this. And and he said, well, Dad speeds, you know.
Yep.
Oh, man, how convicting, right?
Yeah.
I'm going, yeah, he's not wrong.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm going, man, so having boundaries, if I'm going to ask my son to do I need to have that same boundary on myself. And so we all have those. If I'm asking my kids not to watch rated R movies, why do I get to watch those? Things like that. What boundaries are so complex, and the big one right now is phones. You know, at the dinner table, I hear dads and moms say, "Oh, well, this is important from work."
Yeah.
Kid could say, "Well, this is important from school,
That's
from
right.
friends."
That's
right. So it's that's the most complex. That's a hard one.
I'm with you, brother. We've talked about technology before on this podcast. We'll talk about it again. I'm having to discipline myself. It's my wife and I now. We're almost empty nest. Our youngest is in college, so when he's away, we're empty nest. And, you know, the phone is there. It's tempting to just pick it up and do 5 minutes of work. I know what I'm going to do. I'm only going to do 5 minutes. It's not going to take away. But you know what it does? It does. You know, it becomes my master, and I become its slave. And just how that's stealing 5 minutes of potential dialogue between my wife and I, or 5 minutes of resting my mind after working all day long, and just how important that is to refreshing me. Or 5 minutes I could just be kicking around a concept with the Holy Spirit and God around something in His Word. Like, it's stealing something away from me. And to be able to say to our children with integrity, look, phones go in the charging station in our bedroom at 9 o'clock at night and nobody touches it until the next morning, means I got to do that too.
Yes, I mean, the phone opens up a world of invitations that are constant.
Mm-hmm.
They are pouring in every moment of the day, and we have to constantly be saying no. And over time, those invitations can get overwhelming because we do not feel a sense of self-control. Right. And over time, during the day, if you're tired, it's harder to say no to the phone. And it's a persistent invitation that has little text invitations and notification invitations and distraction invitations. So that's where boundaries help us figure out what to say yes to and what to say no to. And there's so many differences between parents. And you may have an impulsive child and a rule-following child, and the boundaries will look different.
Yes.
And that's where it gets complicated, Ron.
It does. Danny, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Ron. It's always a pleasure and honor to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Next time, we're going to hear from Jim Ramos about growing up in a blended family.
On my 13th birthday, my mom came in and said, hey, we sat the kids down and gave us the, it's not your fault we're getting a divorce speech. And I remember vividly saying, finally.
That's Jim Ramos, next time on Family Life Blended. I'm Ron Deal. Thanks for listening. And thank you to our Family Life Legacy partners for making this podcast possible. To help us produce this podcast and other resources, you can make a tax-deductible donation as well to Family Life Blended by going to familylife.com/blendedpodcast and clicking the donate button. Or if you'd prefer, you can just simply call us at 1-800-FL-TODAY. Tell them your gift is for Family Life Blended. Our chief audio engineer is Keith Lynch, Bruce Goff, our producer. Our mastering engineer is Justin Adams, project coordinator Ann Caro, and theme music provided by Braden Deal. Family Life Blended is produced by Family Life and is part of the Family Life Podcast Network.